but I do believe that taxes at the local level that directly benefits us, we can see where the money is going, is what taxes were meant for. You know, it's not to tax us and send it overseas to somebody where we will never see the money, but where we can see where that money is going was the whole purpose why communities decided to tax themselves, so they could pool their money, build schools and libraries and firehouses.
Mr. Gregory, Dr. Patrick.
One technical thing, just because it flows from our last discussion, wanted to note to make sure everybody else can see that the board resolution number that's referenced in this language is the correct one, which is very important, because I would remind you is when we, Ms. Crawford can correct me if I'm wrong, but when we, if you approve this tonight, this is what gets submitted to the county. So it's very important to make sure that technically it's correct. Philosophically, it says what you want it to say, but it's also technically, on target with everything. I checked that, and that is now the right resolution, or that reflects the right resolution number. So that's a piece of good news. But I would also say that this does, as Mr. Street was reading all the whereases, it does several things. And one of them I'll follow up on a little bit later. But first, it gives establishes legal authority. You have legal authority to do this. Directs staff to submit this ballot language to the county prior to the deadline, statutory deadline of September 9th. It establishes the ballot language, all of that uppercase narrative in there. Our attorney has established that this is a lawful date for the election. And it also, I'll use the word directs, but it really says we will participate with the county in a coordinated election. And that's kind of a prelude to potentially the next agenda item also. That's all I have.
Anything else? Thanks everyone for all of the work on this. It will be, having participated in the 2001 bond election, was really great. And I can think of a comment that I heard not too long ago that somebody was making a comment that they were sitting in a school that was built, having a conversation, sitting in a school that was built at the 2001 bond. And one of the neat things is, as we drove around the district on Tuesday, all individually I know, but as you drove around the district, there was a lot of stuff that you got to see that were because of that 2001 district, whether it's BCC, Mountain, Wolford. I ride by Wolford often on my bike, and that's the new Wolford. It's not the Wolford my wife remembers. It is the new Wolford, and to see all of those things happening is always very exciting from 2001. And now we get to do something great for kids. One of the comments that was made earlier today is it's all about kids, and that's what this is.
You sparked a thought with me, Mr. Stream. You are right, and I was just talking with a friend the other day about the fact that, my children attended schools that someone else built. We moved into this community, and my children began attending schools a year later that someone else paid for to build. And now, my children have graduated, and I consider it my privilege to build a school for someone else.
As do I. We have a motion. We have a second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Borland?
Aye.
Mrs. Bullock?
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson? Aye. Mr. Street?
Aye.
Mrs. Van Mater?
Aye.
Thank you. The next one we will not read. We need a motion to approve Resolution 207-16, approval of intergovernmental agreement with El Paso County regarding the conduct and administration of the November 8, 2016 general election.
Evening again.
We get a motion? We get a motion?
Oh, yes. So moved.
Okay. Second, if you have a motion, this
Yes.
is getting late, I know, motion and second. Discussion, Dr. Henschel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gregory.
Well, as you can see, these items were kind of formulated in a sequential manner, so that at any point, if one were to not be approved, then they kind of halted at that point to the next agenda items. So we're just continuing down the line. This is now an item that's the result of what you just approved. This is somewhat redundant, but I'll tell you why in just a minute. In the prior resolution you just read, there was a whereas that Mr. Street read that said the district would participate in the coordinated election. This says that also. It also said in Mr. Street's comments or reading the resolution that you would appoint essentially me as the designated election official. This resolution does that also, so that's the redundancy part. What didn't happen, or what was not available in the previous resolution, was the agreement itself. So the intent of this is to show you and those who elected you the actual agreement. And anybody out there now can see what the agreement says between us and the county. It's not too complicated. I guess down to the kind of the nuts and bolts of it, it's a governmental agreement between us and the county that says we're going to participate in their election. It identifies the duties and expectations that the county will have and that the school district will have through the DEO, they call it, designated election official, which would be me, and the CEO, which is the county's election official, if you will. C doesn't really stand for county, just so you know, but it's essentially their election official. This goes a little bit further also because it has the financial component of it. I think it's important for everyone to know it's not something that's negotiated. It's not something that we put competitive bids out on the street for and see who bids gives us the best number and the best service. This is essentially the county takes the estimated or projected cost of what this election is going to cost for participating, not the presidential piece of it and all that, but the local piece of it, and splits that. I'm told it's 13 jurisdictions locally in El Paso County that will participate in this ballot. And they estimate the cost and divide that then across the 13 not school districts, but 13 taxing jurisdictions. Or candidate ballots. It doesn't all have to be ballot issues, it could be candidates. And they estimate that cost to be, it's in your packet, they estimate that cost to be about just under $93,000, half of which will be due when we submit the ballot language you just approved. So that's kind of high level description of what's in here. It does have a clause to back out or cancel the election at any one point in time. And essentially, we would owe the costs that have been incurred by the county up to that point. They could go further than that. It does say that in there also, but generally it is up to that point. The cost could go higher than $92,000. It could be less than $92,000. We'll know that at the very end. Really, the $92,000 is put in there to determine the 50% piece up front. That's really its purpose. With that, I'll be quiet.
Ms. Van Meter.
Thank you, Mr. Gregory, and I'm sure you know you can step up to the plate because you know what I'm going to throw across the plate right now. Why on earth $92,000? It's significantly higher than the cost of our last election to elect board members. And and with all the jurisdictions participating this time, I would have expected those costs and that bill from the county to be lower. Are they explaining to you why that cost is so high?
No, short answer is no. But I can tell you, because it's a fact, it's the same explanation I give state legislatures about school finance funding, that costs keep rising, whether it's salaries, benefits, services, or products. Costs keep rising, yet at a much faster rate than what the negative factor takes away. So I think it's just a factor of the cost of an election today. I want to say the last time we did it, and I know we have some former board members in the room that might be able to help me, but I think it was around $60,000, and that would have been 8-ish years ago now, 6 years ago or so. So yeah, I don't have a good answer for you, Ms. Van Meter.
That was going to be my next question, by the way, was what the last bond or what the mill levy override cost. I wasn't privy to
I
that
think
information. I
the
wasn't on
last
board.
election we participated in was actually a board candidate election, which, you know,
Yes.
which thankfully has been zero now, but I think the $60,000 goes back close to the last MLO, not 2001, but 2008.
Yeah, because I was just surprised. I was expecting something better this year because we've heard about so many jurisdictions that are participating this year. I expected it to be a little bit less cost intensive for us.
Mr. Wong?
I don't want to speak for Mr. Berlin, but I suspect that there have been some changes in required electoral procedures that might affect this, equipment acquisitions and that kind of thing. And in any regard, it's the only game in town. What are we gonna do? We want to have an election, we're gonna pay $93,000.
Any other questions? We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Borland?
Aye.
Mrs. Bullock?
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Strebe?
Aye.
Mrs. Van Meter? Aye.
Thank you. Video/recording discussion. We've had a couple of conversations regarding this. I know this has been a top of mind topic, and you remember we had pretty extensive conversation last time. And one of the things that I will take the responsibility for this is wanted to have the conversation. I thought it was a very good conversation, and one of the realities that struck me is we have a governance model that I didn't follow. And because I didn't follow that governance model, the question then becomes, anytime we make decisions like this with governance, we really should ask our constituency. First and foremost, we should ask the question of the constituency, and I think that was some of the conversation that we didn't have as much of. And Governance Policy 4.3, which is our job description, talks about we have a responsibility to ask. And so my question to you is, what approach do we want to take? Oftentimes we've used board linkages, there's been task force, there's committees. I would open up to the conversation of what's the conversation? How do we want to go about this? I'll open up the discussion.
Well, I'm kind of leaning toward linkage of some kind as opposed to a task force. Reason being that I think that could move faster. I think it would be, we could get to the same place. It's a fairly small question. I mean, it's not hugely technical in nature, doesn't have terribly far-reaching financial implications. So I would kind of think we should put together some kind of linkage model as opposed to. That's just my position.
So again, this is conversation. Ms. Van Meter.
I agree with you, Mr. Borland, primarily because what I think the purpose of a linkage in this case would be to broaden the question. I think we became very focused because of a specific request from a specific constituent, and I understand that. It's easy to do, and we want to be responsive to our constituents, but what I'd really like us to do, it doesn't preclude us from doing anything about the videotaping, but I'd like for us to back up and have a linkage where we talk with our constituency about the ways in which they would like to interact with us. I think that it's really important for us to have that, and we've had conversations like that in the past with folks, and I think it's important for us to continue to do that. We haven't done that one in a while. We've done some other specific linkages over the past few years. We've focused them more on academic programs and that sort of thing. But I'd like to simply hear from our constituency the many ways, and rather than, you know, ask them a specific question about, do you want video recording or not, what I'd like to ask them is, what are the ways that you find valuable to communicate with us? How would you like for us to do that? How could we be more responsive to you? And then from there, it would not surprise me one bit. We've heard people here tonight say that they would like video recording. It wouldn't surprise me at all if there were people who said that. But I would also like to hear what else they have to say. I don't want to get so laser focused in on one idea or one solution that we miss other opportunities. Because there are other people, you know, I've asked people in the community here and there what they think about it. It's on the board agenda. They know that. We have many people who look at our agendas and read our meeting minutes. I've asked people, what do you think about that item? I've even had a couple of people come up to me and ask me about the item specifically, what prompted this, and I said it was, you know, input from a constituent. And I've had people who've also said to me, I don't feel a need for that. But that doesn't mean that we don't need to do it, or we shouldn't do it. It just isn't their way. So it started making me think, well, okay, we should communicate with people in a variety of ways, and I think we do that now. We may find out after the linkage that we're doing most everything that they want anyway. We may not find a lot of differences, but we also may find some solutions. As usual, when we talk with people, we find out things that we never even thought of. So really good ideas that people have, and so I would like to see us pursue that, no matter what we do with the specific question of do we video meetings.
If I understand you correctly, you're saying create a broader question, however we do it, create a broader question of how do we ultimately how we communicate. One of the things that I had somebody mention to me just yesterday that said transparency, what you define transparency is having the information available if you want it, and all of it is. The question is what does videotaping do, or video recording, or live streaming, however, and it makes it convenient. So that's one of the questions is, it's really, and some people would probably debate with me, I'm sure, that I look at it more as, can we make something convenient and access to our information for our constituency, and as was pointed out, from a technology standpoint, what people look at. So, you know, I'm totally separated that if you want the information, you get the information. Add some of that evidence by at our work sessions, and that is there. Can we make it easier? Absolutely. Can we make it even more convenient? I think that's one of the important things I'm asking. So you're asking the question of an overall transparency question. How can we be more transparent? And out of that will kind of end these answers.
Yes, and I would definitely expect this specific topic to come up, but that's just it. Rather than focusing in, I think we've become too quickly and narrowly focused on the how. This is one how. There are many other hows, many other ways that we could do this. So I would like for us to back up and ask the question, what? What is it that would make it easier for our constituents? What would make it more convenient? What would make it easier for them? So I would like to back up and ask that broader question, and this is simply one piece of it.
Mrs. Johnson?
I was thinking along the same lines as Mrs. Van Mater and to a certain extent, Mr. Borland. You know, the assertion has been made on multiple occasions that that District 20 has a transparency problem. And so I would suggest that that's the question we need to consider. Not whether perhaps the idea of video recording will address that. I don't know. And there's other subsets of the question. Is transparency as defined by video and X dollars, how about we're meeting the letter of the law, and doing so, then the bottom of the basement cost is $0. So how can you, there's probably a constituency or a number of people out there who say, well, I don't know if I want to pay more than nothing, for my information to be relayed to me. So that's why I think it's absolutely very important and inherent in the nature of transparency to decide the issue with a broad swath of the community present. And I'm talking about the District 20 community. That means students, parents, teachers, administrators, patrons, all those people need to weigh in. To date, we haven't heard from a broad swath. We've only heard from those who espouse a particular viewpoint. I would need validation from a representative sample directing me to move forward beyond meeting the law, complying with the law as it's written, which we do. And I would note that we have long exceeded the standards, in fact, long before it was statutorily required. In terms of financial transparency, we have been at the forefront, long before it was required, many things implemented. So, yeah, let's decide what would be the best mechanism, what would be the best forum to determine the broader question of, is District 20's Board of Education failing in terms of transparency? What steps would you like to see if you agree that that is something that needs to be improved? Or even if you don't think it needs to be improved, should we take these? You know, I am loath to say, sure, I think we need this, there's a problem, and let's go ahead and pay top dollar or any other amount of dollars when we proceed. So that's where I stand on
Okay, and I don't disagree with any of that, and I think that a linkage discussion about transparency is always called for. I think that's a good question to ask, and indeed that's the purpose of linkage. I don't want to. I want to get input to answer a specific question. I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and I'll compromise. And if that's what y'all want to do, that's okay with me. But I would, I just don't want to see us push this question out for a period of months when it could be answered, in my view, in a period of months. That's my thought. As I said, I'm willing to compromise, but maybe we need to do both. How's that for compromise? Let's do both.
I don't know, that sounds like a qualified compromise.
Colonel Hardy. I'd agree with Ms. Van Mater that the idea of bringing in a broad community engagement to figure out, what more can we do, how do they want to interact with us is a good gesture. The only thing I would caution with this specific question is, and I'm a big fan of governance, when the cost of the governance to be administered exceeds the cost of a potential solution, that's when kind of, governance goes bad, right? So whatever solution we engage in, let's make sure that we don't spend so much time and resources and money thinking about it when if it's something we can implement relatively quickly and for less expensive or for less money than all of that. And that would be a course of action.
You bring up a great point, Colonel Harding, and I agree with you. That's why I like the idea of linkage, because it's one of the very least expensive things we can do. It does take staff time, it takes board time, but it's mostly board time, and there's very little expense at all with it, and that's what makes it really effective. And we could turn it around fairly quickly, so I think we're in agreement.
And board time is cheap. We're free.
That's right. Cheap, it depends on, whose ox is being gored in that statement, doesn't it? But yes.
By the time when we're all available.
But to that end, though, I do not want to delay the discussion. I agree with Mr. Borland about it, but I would say that I think I want to make sure that we do it well, and I also, I do have a concern about this while we're talking about the resource of time. The board's time is extremely valuable in the conversation we just had about the bond. And we have a lot more work to do with the bond. I do not want to delay a linkage for that reason, but I also want to make sure that we remember that, the kids are our priority right now. How we communicate with our constituency is really important. It's a very important issue, but I don't want it to take precedence or push its way to the front of our already packed agenda. So I just want us to be aware of that balance and what we need to do to get the balance, so we get the linkage done in a reasonable amount of time. I don't want to put it off until next year or anything like that. I just want to make sure that we're very cognizant of that, because the next thing that I know is going to happen, not because anybody has told me, but because I've been on this board for a while and I understand the feel and the flow of it is, I am certain that I'm going to receive an email from Ms. Adad sometime in the next probably 24 hours or so, probably maybe Monday, asking for availability for continued work studies, because we're going to need to be doing work studies on this. And I just know that that's what's going to come up.
You're talking about the bond.
About the bond,
Yeah.
yes, for continued work studies on the bond.
Prioritization.
So prioritization and the order of all of that, and we'll be diving down more into the details of all of that. So that work's not finished. What we just approved tonight is the beginning. And we've already done a tremendous amount of work on that outside of these meetings, and we'll be having to do more of that in more work studies. So I want us to simply be cognizant of that and understand that this is an important issue to the community, but the house is not on fire. This isn't something that people have been talking to us about for 2 years, and we haven't been doing it. It's something that we've been discussing for a month or so over the summer. So I just want us to make sure that we put all of that into perspective, while still understanding it is an important issue and it needs to be addressed.
I know Dr. House is gonna hate me for saying this, but how hard would it be to just do a survey, just email it out? I know, I can't remember if it's District 38 or if I heard this at NSBA, that there was another district that does a survey on a pretty regular basis, asking their community specific questions about the board. And our character and climate survey doesn't ask anything about how do you think the board is doing. You know, and I think you could have some very well worded questions and say, do you think the board should televise their meeting at a cost of $25,000, or do you think they should do it at a cost of $5,000? This is what you'll get. Or do you think they should, audio is good enough, this is what you'll get? And I know you hate surveys.
No, I don't hate surveys. No, it would be very easy for us to do. We stand ready to support the board. I don't know when the character and climate survey goes out.
Of October.
End of October.
I like the idea of a survey in some regards. However, first of all, I would not pair it with the character and climate survey, because those are two different things. We're asking about the character and climate of our
No,
schools.
I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
wasn't suggesting that we do, I was just saying that we don't ever ask. We ask how your principal's doing, how your teachers are doing, but we never ask. how
We
the
have not
we have
asked
never
for a
asked
survey.
that was my
Your question. Yes, no, and I would agree with that then, that I like the idea of a survey. However, it depends on what the focus of the survey is. The questions that you were talking about would be specific about how to implement things. And so that might be something that comes out of the linkage, or we could have a survey that would ask the questions we're asking the linkage. What are the ways in which you would like to communicate with the board? I actually would rather have the conversation with people and then get that specificity, and then perhaps we can come back to them with a survey like that about how to implement what they say. But there are a couple of different ways of doing it. We could start out with the survey if we wanted to, and ask them about the ways in which they would like to communicate with the board. That would be another thing that would, we would not, you know, then we would not have the face-to-face linkage. But I like the linkage and the interaction, because I'm not a real fan of multiple choice, you know. But we've talked so many times on those surveys about how we have to be careful about how we interpret that data.
Well, I
Because
do
it's about how
too,
you
I
ask the
like the
questions.
idea of a linkage, but I look at my calendar and I just not see where we're gonna squeeze that in.
And I just want to say on the surveys real quick, you'll remember 3-4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, we would get a lot of feedback from parents, enough, surveying us every other week. So we made a concerted effort to consolidate, to do that. So if the board would like to do a survey, we'll do it well and we'll do it very quickly. But I just want to say that that was the impetus on that one. We probably were doing too much 4 or 5 years ago, and we've since cut down.
I think they thought he liked surveys too much.
What else? Who wants to summarize?
Well, I don't know, this isn't a summary. I just wanted to thank you, Mr. Street, for introducing the conversation, for all the time that you devoted individually meeting with Mr. and Ms. Esty. That your stewardship of ensuring that this is something that the board considers is much appreciated. And I think it speaks volumes to the character of the board, and that it's important that we honor our community. And I feel like the best way we can honor it is by following our norms and procedures. And that includes seeking community input before we take a step that would commit any sum towards anything related to the district. So I think it's important, and I want to thank you. And whatever form, I think a survey is sort of, well, a task force or a linkage is a living survey. You hear all those viewpoints right then, it's more immediate. I share your concerns, all of our concerns as to exactly when. But the priority is, and I think it also speaks for itself, that transparency is inherent in asking the question. If we were to move forward on our own unilaterally just based on suggestion, I think that would be counter to transparency, or that would certainly not rise to the standard of transparency. So it's important that we take some mechanism, we use some mechanism to seek community input, representative community input, and before we move forward. That's not a summary, but.
May I make a comment out of order a bit? If you send a survey out, it's only going to reach parents of students and not the community as a whole.
And it only reached 2,000 out of.
This is, excuse me, this is not a participative meeting, but thank you for the comments. I believe what I'm hearing is, again, GP43 talks about linkage as one of the ways, or some sort of meeting or some sort of task force, and I believe what I'm hearing is there's definitely some support. Linkage. Question is an action.
Y'all need to be here. That's the hardest thing, is finding a time and a file this.
Our policy does not require all of us to be there for a linkage.
Or even a quorum.
No, it does not. It does not require a quorum. We could have a linkage with one board member who brings the information back to the board if we chose to do it that way. So that is a good point.
Mr. Street has nothing.
I'll let him do
Mr.
it.
Portland. This is the only time that you meet.
I'd be happy to participate in that with anyone who wants to be a part of that. And maybe that is a better use of our time, is to have a couple of us there so we get more than one perspective. Maybe we don't all have to be there, or we try to set a time when most of us can be there and there are just some board members available and some are not. I really do value the face-to-face, and the more I think about that, I think the place for the survey is in the implementation. If we get some ideas from our community and then we're talking about implementation,